I ask you to consider why motivation is important in sport. Why do we need to understand it? Well, I'm sure you come up with some reasons. I've got my own, and as usual, mix and match as you need to. It helps us to understand why sports performers make substantial sacrifices in order to become successful. Consider a swimmer, for example, who gets up every morning at 5 a.m. to practice before going to school, college or work. There's a motivation to do that. We need to know why. It also helps us to understand why certain sports performers are more successful than others. It ensures maximum effort at the most appropriate time. We could also say that an understanding of motivation in terms of sports psychology allows us to understand why people continue to enjoy sport and physical participation in physical activity and exercise. Of course, understanding motivation and how we can increase motivation will also encourage sedentary people to take up sport and exercise, and quite importantly, to keep doing it, okay? It helps us to retain these people in sport. It's generally accepted you will need to be motivated to achieve your goals. If you aren't, you'll fall by the wayside. Okay then, I've got another task for you. What motivates you as an individual? Please think in terms of participation in sport and exercise, education, work, and also skill development. For example, I know a lot of you are around that age where you're learning to drive, so you could think about that as well. That's an important skill in terms of employability. Again, as normal, take a few minutes and get back to me when you're ready. Okay, it'd be interesting for me to see, if I actually could, what you came up with in your groups or on your own. Now, we're all motivated by different things and to different levels. It's really not a simple process. So we can say types of motivation. And as I say, at this stage, we can divide them into two distinct areas: intrinsic motivation and also extrinsic motivation. Let's consider intrinsic motivation at first. Intrinsic could mean being motivated to enjoy sport, to play sport, to train in sport, really for the pure love of the game and for getting involved with things, okay? There's no real urge to obtain any external rewards. By that I mean trophies, cups, even money perhaps. There's not a great deal of fear of failure in this case. It's really about participation for fun, or we can say the feel-good factor. On the opposite side of things, we've got extrinsic. Extrinsic refers to outside influences. These actions typically are influenced by outcomes imposed by others. So that could be winning a tournament, could be winning a football game, could be passing an exam. There are external sources of motivation present. This may result in anxiety or fear of failure and embarrassment in some cases, okay? The participation and involvement in an extrinsic way, that's really, really important in terms of your own personal identity. So, in simple terms, we've got someone who's intrinsically motivated. They play football, for example, because they love playing football. On the extrinsic side of things, we've got someone who plays football, perhaps, because they want to get some money, or they want to win a trophy and so on. Okay? This is a very basic, broad definition there of the two different types of motivation. When we consider motivation then, touched on, there are individual differences. And a successful coach really will need to understand motivation and how they can affect it in a positive way. There are various factors which will affect it, as we've already touched on. Of course, we need to be able to enhance motivation not only in a group but in an individual setting, and that's quite a skill in itself. There's an element there of differentiation. How do successful coaches develop this understanding? How do they develop this skill to motivate different people in perhaps different ways? Probably derived from how they were taught originally. Also, how a coach believes motivation is acquired or increased can often play an important role. If a coach believes that people are responsible for their own motivation and their own behaviour, then they are likely to give little feedback. Whereas another coach may make a conscious effort to provide more positive feedback and more regular feedback and encouragement in order to motivate that individual or group of players. We can say that we can use motivation in that way as a carrot, okay? You probably heard of the stick and carrot approach. The carrot is a reward. Stick, of course, is not so much of a reward. So when we consider different approaches to motivation, we can say that they really come under the umbrella of Sage's definition. If you remember the original one from 1977 we considered. We can say that motivation is trait or participant-centered. There's a trait or participant-centered view. Motivation there is a function of individual characteristics, your personality, your needs, what you want to achieve. We can also say that motivation can be situational-centered. There's a situational-centered view. In that case, motivation is determined primarily by the situation, what's happening around you. So you may find yourself being extremely motivated in some areas, for example, but in a particular situation, you may lose motivation. So let's say I'm very, very motivated to be a player, and I enjoy playing football, I work really hard, I'm incredibly self-motivated, just for the love of the game. I've got high levels of intrinsic motivation. But as a result of a course I'm currently studying, I need to also become a qualified football coach. And if I'm honest, maybe I don't really enjoy coaching that much. My motivation's not that strong. So in similar areas there, you might think it's football, but I'm far more motivated to play in football than coaching football. So that's situational specific. We can also consider the interactive view when we look at motivation, okay? And we'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. So as I said, there's generally 3 approaches. These fit in with personality approaches, which were trait, situation, and of course interaction. So let's consider traits at first, okay? Now, we can say that traits are enduring and stable. They don't change that much. We can say that a trait is a combination of personality, the person's needs, the goals of the athlete or player. So therefore, we could classify someone as a natural winner or a natural loser. This one does tend to be a little bit tricky, okay, because you might find yourself in a very negative environment, which could have an influence on someone's motivation, and it could change in that way. Of course, conversely, we could be in a positive environment, which would lead to an increase in motivation. If we look at the situation responsible for motivation, this is in direct contrast to the trait approach. I can be motivated in football, but not, let's say, in gymnastics or vice versa. This might suggest that this approach is true. What about performing in your sport all the time? The situation may have changed. Perhaps we're losing when we've won previously. Or perhaps the coach starts criticising us when they haven't done so in the past. How do you remain motivated? So situation is not the primary determinant of motivation here, although it does play a part. We've also got interaction. This is a combination of the individual and the situation. Neither of these are solely responsible for determining motivation in that case, okay? It's a bit of both. It's a combination. What's going on and that actual person that's involved in what's going on. There's a model there you should look at, okay? Try and make things a little bit simpler for you. You can see there on the left-hand side, this is called the interactional model of motivation. You see your personal factors, personality, your needs, the needs of the athlete, the interests of the athlete, and the goals, the things they need to achieve or they wish to achieve. Then you have participant in terms of situation, interaction, what's going on around them, okay? You can see that's linked into participant motivation. On the right-hand side, also feeding into the participant and the situation, you see situational factors. The coaching style. What type of approach does the coach use? Are they very dictatorial, for example? Do they use a more laissez-faire approach? Do they use question and answer? Different people, as you know, will be motivated by different approaches from the coach. The level of competition that they're playing at or engaged with, of course, that's going to have an effect, okay? Are you winning? Are you losing? Think about how you feel when you win a game or when you're winning a game. Let's say you're 5-0 up at half time. I imagine motivation levels are quite high. Again, I'm generalising. Some people, when they start to lose or aren't doing so well, they will suffer and feel a loss of motivation. The facility where you're involved with, okay, that's also important. That could have an effect. And the attractiveness of the situation. Are you enjoying it? Is it attractive to you as a person? So it's quite complex, isn't it? You can see that, and there's a lot of different factors involved here, and they do tend to cross over each other quite a lot. Hopefully this model will help you get a grip with things. What I'd like to do now is use 5 guidelines for building motivation. Just consider these. These are based on the interactional model that we've just discussed. So, firstly, both situations and traits motivate people. Coaches often attribute lack of motivation to personality characteristics. Sometimes coaches will put all the blame on the coaching environment that they've provided. Maybe that's true, maybe not. We know that motivation is interactional. There's a number of different factors, and it's important to consider these factors. Secondly, people have multiple motives for involvement and participation. It's not just about winning, or it's not just about having fun. As coaches, we need to observe the participants. Maybe talk to others informally, such as their teacher and so on. Well, what do these kids enjoy in school? Do they like being set a challenge? Do they like working in groups? Do they like problem solving? Maybe even chat to their parents. You could even ask the participants to write down their reasons for participation. This will help you get an idea of why they are motivated to take part in a particular activity. Let's say they come along to football sessions with you and you say, why do you come here? Why do you come along? They might say, I like playing with my friends. They might say, I like winning. You start to get an idea of what motivates them in that way. Please remember, as I've stressed, motives will change over time. As a coach, we need to be flexible, we need to observe our participants, and we need to be able to adapt in relation to their needs, whether that's physical, tactical, technical, or in this case, psychological. We need to be able to adapt and help to improve their motivation if need be, and certainly maintain it. Thirdly, a change in the environment, that can have an effect on motivation. We can consider here somebody moving up from recreational to playing in a more competitive environment. We might find in certain individuals that motivation increases. In others, it may trail off a little. Really what we need to do as coaches is structure the environment in order to meet the needs of the participants. And by that I mean each individual. You can provide multiple opportunities for them to succeed, okay? And please remember that we need to adjust things for the individuals within a group. If we've got 15 players, you've got 15 different personalities there. And they need to have things specific to themselves, particularly with something as complicated and important as motivation. For number 4, I think this is very, very important. Leaders certainly influence motivation. And by leader, we can imply a coach, a teacher, or even perhaps a play leader in some cases. Regardless, they all play an important and critical role in influencing motivation. Now, it's also important to consider here that the behaviour of the leader can change. They can fluctuate, okay? Really, really important to remember this though. How you present yourself, your behaviour, can have a really, really big effect on the motivation of the people that you're working with. I think about a line manager, for example, in work. I'm very fortunate. I've got an extremely positive and proactive line manager. He works very hard and it makes me want to work hard as well. If you're working with someone who doesn't work that hard, how would you feel? Would you be motivated to go that extra step? To maybe work overtime one night or two a week? Maybe not, okay? Think about players. If the coach lacks motivation, is it likely that the players will lack motivation? I don't think that's too difficult to work out for yourselves, okay? Number 5 then. This one is headlined, we need to change undesirable participant motives. Now, some participants, individuals, players, they'll exhibit different motives, okay? Maybe negative motives for taking part. We can use something we call behaviour modification techniques. So for example, a football player's main objective, main motive, may be to inflict injury on others. We really need to change that, don't we? I think that's obvious. And that's something we would need to do as coaches. We need to change motivation, make it a positive thing. I think this is a really good place to take a break. Okay, so please excuse the pun. I don't wish to demotivate you too much. Let's take a few minutes, take a break, get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee, and let's get back together later.